All right, well, I think we'll start the meeting. And so this is Ward 4, and I am Sarah Lewis. I'm City Council Representative for Ward 4, and as is
Rhonda Adams.
And we have had to change this meeting. Normally it was 2 weeks ago, but we moved it, and as a result of that, we will not have a May meeting next week. So we had moved up the May meeting because of Memorial Day to the 23rd, but then we had to move the April one back. So this will take up our April and our May meeting. Before we get going, I want to go through the agenda, and I'd also like to share with you some what I'm calling and what we're calling the rules of engagement, to try to create some structure in our meetings. And part of this is because we have some people that are very passionate, and we want to make sure we stay on the same page. So our agenda is first we're going to go around and introduce ourselves, and I'll go through that, and then Kit Williams, our city attorney, is here to talk to you some about the rock quarry on the west side of town and the process that has gone through. And Adela Gray will be coming to talk with you and just answer questions about the proposed smoking ordinance amendments. And then you'll have a chance to share about neighborhood announcements and questions and so on. So first of all, I'd like for us to go around and introduce ourselves. My name is Sarah Lewis, like I said.
And I'm Rhonda Adams.
I am Brian Waters.
Maurice Rankin.
Charles Taunton.
LaVarn Cooper.
Keith Cooper.
Bill Bowler. Phil Dewey. Kyle Curry.
And I'm Kit Williams.
All right. And people may show up here as well as we go, and that's okay. We'll catch their names as they come in. As far as rules of engagement, what we'd like is just the usual. So keep your questions and comments to the agenda, directly related to the agenda. And then, for example, Kit's going to present, so he'll say a few things, and during presentation, if you can hold your comments and questions until after the presentation, and then we can have time for comments and questions. If you do have a comment, if you can just indicate it via raising your hand, and we'll get to you. And then also, if you'll address your comments straight to either me or Rhonda, and then we can continue the conversation. So, thank you very much. And with that, what I'd like to do is have you, Kit, will you just give us kind of a history of what about the rock quarry ordinance, and then discuss where it is right now. And I know that the people that live further west in Fayetteville on the edge of town out there, they've been working very hard to try to find ways to minimize some of the impacts of the rock quarry on the edge of town. So this has been an ongoing conversation. So.
And in fact, I think you invited me to one of their meetings back in February of '09. And actually showed up on the front page the next day that they were all concerned about this. The rock quarry was right outside the city limits, and the blasting activities especially was bothersome to the neighbors out there and many of their life activities. And so they were in a quandary. They had gone to the county, and the county had given them a little bit of relief, but not a whole bunch. And so they were hoping the city could do more. And we had experience regulating a nuisance right outside the city limits in the Thunder Valley case, which is a motor vehicle racing facility that began racing longer and longer and being more and more disturbing to its neighbors. And so we eventually, after a lot of discussion, a lot of dissension on one side or the other, the city council did pass the motor vehicle racing facility ordinance. It was challenged in court, and our local circuit court judge upheld it, said it was constitutional, even though it was abating a nuisance outside the city limits. And most people think that city powers don't go beyond the city limits. Well, there are many cases in Arkansas that they do, but this was one of the ones. But there wasn't very much litigation on this. I was hoping that would go up to the Supreme Court. In fact, the individual that had challenged it tried to appeal it, but he didn't appeal it properly. So when it got to the Supreme Court, they just threw it out on technical grounds, so we didn't have a firm decision on it. But I did point that out to Sarah and the people out there, that it was possible that we could use the power to cause a nuisance to be abated, which is the statutory power that City Council is given within a mile of our city limits, to regulate the quarries. and that is after many months of hearings, not only at the city council, but also at the ordinance review session, many people coming and talking on both sides of that, meeting with the rock quarry operators to try to make sure we weren't doing something overly oppressive to them. We passed regulations. As soon as we passed regulations, just in a matter of days, I think, the rock quarry that was operated by a foreign corporation, not a Mexican corporation, but a corporation located in another state that did business in Arkansas, filed a suit in federal court. And they could do that because they were in fact a foreign corporation. That's just one of the judicial rules. If it had been a state corporation, then they probably could not have done that. They would have had to sue us in state court, where we already had one decision in our favor. But instead, they did choose the federal court. Well, we sought, and they sued for many different things. One thing that they sued for was Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Act, which would give them attorney's fees. Also, we have insurance for very few things in the city, but we do have insurance against a 1983 action, which is usually when someone sues our police department, saying that they used excessive force or didn't do something right when they arrested somebody. So we have insurance for that, and that means that the insurance company will present a lawyer. We have a policy, unfortunately, that we pay the first $50,000 of any cost. And so we have already paid over $30,000 to our insurance company lawyers to help defend this. It probably would have been $50,000, except I've done most of the work myself to try to keep the costs down. But regardless of that, we were sued, and there was a quick decision by the federal judge was needed for a preliminary injunction, and he ruled against us, said that we had to go ask the court basically for permission before we could abate a nuisance, since it was outside the city limits. We did not feel that was correct. We felt, and of course that would be a pretty much of a deciding factor in any case, because we had not gone and sued them in court before we had passed regulations. So we went and appealed that at the 8th Circuit. The 8th Circuit affirmed, came back down here, and everybody filed for motions for summary judgment. I still felt like we could convince the judge that the law was on our side, and I kept pointing out cases, but regardless, it became pretty apparent that the judge was not going to reconsider his original ruling. And so that's when I came to Sarah and the rest of the council members and said that I thought that it would be best, in our own best interest, to amend the ordinance to remove our extraterritorial application of it, which means it would not apply to that rock quarry anymore. And the city council did that, and when they did that, then the rock quarry really couldn't complain anymore because they were no longer affected by the ordinance. And so the case was dismissed, and now the rock quarry attorneys have asked for over $100,000 in attorney's fees and claimed that they were the winning party. The way I read the constitutional law and the recent constitutional cases, and one reason I brought it before the city council to change the ordinance was to prevent them from ever being, quote, the prevailing party. And so we're still defending that. Judge has not decided that yet. But that's been a year and a half struggle, weekends and stuff. Sarah spent a half day with me over in federal court for required arbitration, or mediation, even though both sides told the mediator at the start, this can't be mediated. But we were over there for half a day anyway, weren't we? Just for fun. And so I was going to bring down a couple bankers' boxes of pleadings and discovery and stuff. It's generated a ton of paperwork, motions, briefs, and all that kind of stuff. But at this point, it's closed, and I don't think that the judge, I better knock on wood there, I don't think the judge is going to award attorney's fees. I think the law is strongly on our side on that, but we have not heard yet. So that's the recap of that particular case.
Can you mention again what, or I guess I can, just to elaborate, the original, what happened as far as Shirley and I had sponsored the ordinance, and it created some guidelines so that it would be less less of an intrusion on the people the citizens that live on the west side of town, because they were, and the things that were in there were things during the ordinance review, the rock quarry operators were at the meeting and they were saying, well, we can minimize the slamming of the gate, the doors on the trucks. And
it's the back tailgate,
the
which
back
is sometimes
tailgate.
slammed to empty the
Right.
bed better, vibrates the bed.
And
Also
then,
makes a very big noise.
right, it identified the hours of operation so that it wouldn't wake people up in the middle of the night, and it also identified when they could blast, and that's really, it couldn't identify the strength of the blast because that is a state level limit that they already have to follow. So that's what it was, and the people out. So if you go out straight out Weddington, it's on the west side of the edge of town, and there are a lot of residents out there that endure that.
And
That
I
land
guess
use.
they're gonna have to continue enduring it for a while because, we're not gonna be able to do anything about it unless there's either change in the law or a definitive ruling by the Arkansas Supreme Court in interpreting their own statute. And that's why I kept asking them to certify it to the Arkansas Supreme Court, because the Arkansas Supreme Court has the right to determine what an Arkansas statute means. And if the federal courts guess at it, they're guessing what the Arkansas Supreme Court's gonna say. But the Arkansas Supreme Court has the ultimate right. It can't even be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Arkansas Supreme Court has the ultimate decision right on what a state statute means. But but they did not want to go in that direction. They don't have to. It's purely discretionary. And so it was obvious that there was not going to be a change in interpretation.
Well, what questions or comments do you have for Kit before we? Yeah.
Kit, you mentioned several times they didn't want to go that direction. Who was they in that case?
Probably the courts, I guess. Maybe I was referring to, in that they didn't.
Oh, I think it was the rock, because it wasn't the rock quarry. They had to tell whether or not they were okay with going to the Supreme Court.
Well, the rock quarry operators did resist the case going to the Arkansas courts.
Okay.
We tried to get it transferred to the Arkansas courts right at the very start. Later on, I asked to have it certified to the Arkansas Supreme Court. Just one question.
Yeah.
Just the interpretation of that statute, nothing else. And they always opposed that.
The rock quarry.
The rock quarry always opposed that, and the courts agreed with them and refused to do it.
I got it.
Yes.
Who is the rock quarry operator?
Rogers Group, Inc., which is a large company that runs quarries all over the United States.
I don't know where they're headquartered, not in Arkansas.
No, if it was, then they wouldn't be a foreign corporation, and they wouldn't. But I think they're in. It might even be Tennessee. They're not.
It's
But
east
they
of-
have many quarries all over the country. They're a national corporation.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, if the people surrounding the quarry had petitioned to annex into Fayetteville, and Fayetteville had done that, and then used their power to annex a pocket surrounded by the city to annex a quarry, would that have changed your situation?
One reason that I suggested that we modify this particular ordinance is so that it would stay in effect within Fayetteville city limits in case we did an annexation in the future. And you could either do it as you suggest there, or it could be an election or something like that. But at this point, I don't see it happening anytime soon. It is possible that it could happen. And of course, Fayetteville has continued to grow, and they are sitting right on our border. So, that could happen.
So and that was an important thing too, to this idea that it still exists. The rock quarry ordinance still exists. It just doesn't extend out to the planning area. Well, it's not even the whole planning area. It was
Just a
designed
mile
as
beyond the city limits.
mile from the city limits. So.
But there are people within the city limits that are being adversely affected
Right.
by the quarry too, and
And that's why I think the
They are our
legislature
citizens.
long ago passed an ordinance saying that to protect your citizens, you could cause a nuisance within a mile
Yes.
to be abated. But that did not win the day. in federal court. Did win the day in state court, but not in federal court.
It's very, I've met with the people too, and they have cracks in their foundations and in their garage ceiling. They have pieces of rock in their yards when they mow, and there are a lot of issues that are very much adversely affecting people out there. I think it's really too bad that we can't get something done, but I know you all have worked very, very hard, and as a newcomer to the issue, I applaud the city's work in trying to get something done. I think you worked very, very hard, and I know some of them are going to be here tonight. I think they're getting tired. They've been fighting for a long time, and they're disappointed, like I know you are, and I am as a newcomer to the issue. But I'm glad that you just keep on trying. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Yes.
Can they, the citizens out there, not sue the quarry people?
They have in fact done that, and they sued against the granting of a conditional use that was granted by the quorum court to allow the quarry to operate. Unfortunately, they just lost that case before the Supreme Court just about a week or two ago.
Okay.
And I can understand the court, no, before the Court of Appeals, not Supreme Court.
Okay.
So it could be still appealed to the
Okay.
Supreme Court. Usually most of those cases are not done that way, but it was a close case, and so it might actually still go to the Supreme Court, where they were contesting the granting of a conditional use to allow them to operate as a quarry, as opposed to what the zone is. There's only 2 zones near a city in Washington County, according to what the quorum court has done. And one is agricultural, and the other is residential with fairly large lots. All the other uses must, they're grandfathered in, or if it's a new use like this was getting to be with the new blasting by the Big Red Dirt Farm, then they were granted a conditional use by the quorum court. And the Court of Appeals said that granting this conditional use was a legislative decision, even though the Supreme Court has just said that in another case, another city granting a conditional use was an administrative decision. And the difference between these two and the way it's looked at is a legislative decision cannot be overturned unless it's clearly arbitrary and capricious, almost impossible. Where it's an administrative decision, it's as if the government did not act. They don't take any consideration of what the government had done. It's a whole new ball game, and it's just a brand new trial. So those are very, very different standards of proof. And we have one conditional use by the Supreme Court saying no, it's nothing to do with legislation, and so it's a new trial. And the other one saying it is legislation, you're not entitled to a trial. So it might be the Supreme Court will look at that. Now I did read the case, and I understood how the Court of Appeals distinguished it, but I don't know.
Okay.
And you can only imagine how much they've spent out of their own pockets to fight this. The numbers are actually pretty staggering, I think, what all they've done. It's very disappointing. We just have to keep trying. That's what all things are.
Yeah.
Well, what I was referring to, what about individual damages? So I know that some of them had, foundations, stuff like that.
They certainly could plead negligence themselves against the quarries, and that is a fairly difficult standard, though, to be able to win in court for. It's possible. But what the quarries will say, oh, we are within the state and federal regulations on our blasting within a certain number of feet of a house. And as long as we stay within those regulations, then basically we're not doing anything wrong. And you can't prove it is our blasting that has caused the crack. Maybe it was a truck going by the road or something else, your house shifting or something. And so it is a very difficult standard for them to individually sue a corporation. And you have 2 quarries out there both blasting, so who's causing the damage?
Okay, thank you for coming to talk with us. And if any of you have other questions, or if you're watching later and you have questions and you want to follow up, you need more information, you can contact one of us. And Kit has worked so hard on this case. So.
I'm unfortunately getting to be an expert in this area of the law.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be.
And so, but that's why, you know, this is why, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a city attorney to help with these types of things, so it's a really important role. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your questions.
All right, Adela Gray has come to talk with us and answer your questions about the proposed amendments to the smoking ordinance that are this is on the agenda tomorrow evening.
It is. For our second reading.
Okay, and Matthew Petty is also a co-sponsor on the amendment to the ordinance. So what I'd like to do is, if you'll tell a little bit about the ordinance, and then maybe some of the reasons why you, at least for you, have sponsored it, and then we can open it up for some questions.
Sure.
Okay. And Adela is Ward 1 City Council representative.
Yes, I'm happy to come, and hopefully I can clear up some things for you if you have any questions. As you know, we've had several actions in the city regarding smoking in the city limits, and back in the 90s there were 2 different actions taken, and at that time it was, you know, places were either marked smoking or non-smoking, and, you know, we had the smoking and non-smoking sections of the restaurants, which most of us felt were pretty inadequate if we were allergic to smoke. And then in '03, there was the current ordinance, which is 9505, and that regulated smoking in most public places and places of employment, which included restaurants. However, bars were exempt, and so were tobacco stores. And the fact is that the folks who worked on it at that time said that they had to do that in order to get it to pass. And they were very sorry that they had to, and wish they hadn't have even exempted bars at that time, but they did. So, you know, there's considerable research to show that secondhand smoke, which of course workers and patrons and musicians in these bars are exposed to, and so we feel like that it's you know, it's purely a health and safety issue for our citizens, and it's also an economic issue because so many of these workers do not have insurance, and so when they get sick, you know, they have to go to the emergency room, and you know who pays when they have to go to the emergency room. That's all of us who do health insurance. And that's a sad thing. I've learned today that maybe one bar on Dixon Street may have insurance for their workers. But it's very unusual because it's very expensive, number one, for the restaurant or the bar owner, but also most of the workers are part-time, they're not full-time, and so they don't have to have don't have to have health insurance for them. So far as the performers, you know, many of them, they need the gigs, they need to be able to play, and they will play in restaurants where they don't really want to play. They don't want to be exposed to that secondhand smoke, but they need the money. And the workers in the bars need the money as well. And, you know, perhaps they could get a job someplace else, but this one might fit their schedule or whatever better. And I know some of them smoke. That's beside the point. The point is that it's a health and safety issue for the citizens of Fayetteville. 50% of our nation has already researched this and gone smoke-free. There's another economic impact that is very significant. We were told by the Deputy Surgeon of Health from the state, from Little Rock, last reading, that we have about 200 bars in the state of Arkansas that are not smoke-free. Until those bars are smoke-free, there are many large conventions that won't even consider coming to Arkansas. So we don't get to share our state with big conventions like the American Heart Association, the American Cancer Association. Those who know they're very directly affected by cigarettes, they won't even consider going to a state that's not smoke-free. And the deputy told us at the last meeting, if we can become smoke-free, if we can get our bars in Arkansas smoke-free, then we will be considered 100% smoke-free, and we will be able to recruit those large organizations, which of course we want to do. Let's see. You know, so far as why I felt I needed to bring this forward, you know, I have very personal contact with lots of secondhand smoke. My father and mother both died as a result of cigarettes. Daddy was a big smoker, and for 45 years, from the time he was a young man, and mother breathed the secondhand smoke. You know, he even would wake up in the night and smoke. And, you know, he had no idea he was killing mother with that, but he was. She died of heart problems very shortly, you know, within about 10 years after he died of asthma and emphysema and enlarged heart and all the things that come with smoking. So, you know, on the other hand, my husband's family had no smoking in their family at all, and so we got to enjoy his parents till in their 90s. So I have a very, you know, that's just one of the reasons that I feel very strongly about it. I personally feel like that my breathing the secondhand smoke in utero, you know, Dad smoked in the room with Mother the whole time she was carrying me as a baby in very tightly closed cars. I can remember from a tiny child just feeling like I could hardly breathe in the car. Well, it was because Daddy was smoking and had the windows rolled up. Well, he had no idea what it was doing to my lungs, but I think it definitely weakened them. It's anytime I have any kind of a bad cold or anything, it goes straight to my chest, and I have bronchitis. And so I feel that because I breathed that until I went away to college at 17 and a half, I breathed that secondhand smoke. So, you know, there are wonderful spots that we'd like to go to in our city to hear certain musicians, for instance, but we can't go. I'm not going to further expose myself, and my husband's very allergic to it. So, you know, and so far as personal rights, then we don't have the personal right of going into that bar and where there's a lot of smoking. So I feel very strongly, and some, you know, some folks have said, well, let's let the state legislature take care of it, and then it'll, well, you know, as was before, we had to take the steps first. Fayetteville had to take the first steps, and then the city, then the state did it. So followed through with no smoking in the restaurants. So I just think that being the progressive city that we are, it's our responsibility to take this action, which is purely a health and safety question for our citizens.
Thank you very much. And so I would like to open it up if you have questions or comments for Adela, clarification and so on, or Rhonda, do you have anything? You ready for them to share? Okay, yeah. What do you have? Yes.
Well, I'm behind you 100%.
Thank you.
It's always mystified me why some people feel that they're the only one who has a right. For example, the bar owner who wants to have a smoke-free bar. How come he is the only one that has a right, and the waiters and waitresses who work there don't have a right to clean air? People might like to come in and do business with him, don't have a right. But it's always this one group that says, well, you're violating my rights. How about the other side's rights?
So you're saying, who says they're getting their rights violated? I don't understand your question.
Well,
exactly.
according to the newspaper accounts, at any rate, various bar owners have said that their right to have a smoking bar is being violated.
Well, they can have a smoking bar if they want to. There are plenty of bars that are not smoking. Already there are a few bars that have chosen to go non-smoking.
What he was saying is, he was saying that can I try to understand, see, make sure I can understand what you're saying. I think what you're saying was that if a bar owner chooses to have a smoking establishment, that sure, that's okay, but the thing is that has the potential to infringe on the rights of the people working there as well.
Right.
Oh, because of the air quality issue.
Right.
I think that, what I've heard is, well, they can go work someplace else. They can go work in another bar if they want to. Well, they may or may not be able to.
Well,
And the musicians,
50 years or so ago, people of a particular race could have gone and eaten at another lunch counter too.
That's right. That's exactly right. And we did away with that, didn't we? And folks didn't wear seat belts. We don't give folks a choice now of whether or not to wear seat belts, because we know the research shows they're more apt to come out of a wreck alive if they have a seat belt on. So these are all health and safety issues. They sure are.
What other questions? Yes.
Has anybody estimated the state's loss of revenue for all the conventions that don't locate here?
No, sir, I didn't hear that. That was not a part of the presentation.
It's a good question.
But we know, anytime a large, which it would be, probably 10 or 15,000 people would come, they're gonna spend a lot of money.
Yes, in bars.
They're gonna spend a lot of money, period. They're gonna spend a lot of money in hotels, in restaurants, and anytime, and that's just like when we have conventions in Fayetteville, we know that they spend money everywhere.
Adela, can I ask a
Yes.
follow-up
Yes.
to your question? Who was the gentleman that asked?
Bates, Mr. Bates, Dr. Bates. In fact, our coalition folks have
What's
come.
his role?
He's Deputy Surgeon General for the state of Arkansas Health Department. Isn't that right, Tom?
So that's who would have those data.
I would think so.
Would he have the data telling us an estimate of how much money we lose because we're not a smoking-free state and we cannot recruit conventions?
I can certainly find that information for you and get it to you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And he's the Deputy Health Officer, and he's the Chief Science Officer, so he's not the Surgeon General.
And Tyler, will you introduce yourself?
Sure.
Please?
I'm Tyler Clark. I'm with the Northwest Arkansas Tobacco Free Coalition, and this is Paige Daniel with the Tobacco Free Coalition as well. Thanks for having us.
Deputy Health Officer for?
Arkansas Department of Health.
Okay, Arkansas Department of Health.
And Chief
Okay.
Science Officer.
Good question. Did you have
No, that was it.
yes, Bill?
What is your, I really ought to address all three of you on this question. I'm curious, as members of the city council, but Adela particularly because you're sponsoring this.
Sure.
What's your reading of the degree of public support and public opposition at this time to the proposed amendment?
Okay.
Well, we have a poll that was taken by these folks, and it says that in Ward 4, 62% of you said you would like for us not to have smoking in the bars. Ward 3 said 62, Ward 2 said 61, and Ward 1, there were 71%. Now, overall, that was what, Tyler, in the city?
The whole city, 64% were in favor of the smoke-free bar ordinance.
Right. Now, the workers, the poll was broken down into workers and patrons. And the workers in Ward 1 said, 81% of them said they would like to not. Of course, it was an anonymous poll, and they could openly speak. And the patrons, 75% of them. in Ward 1. In Ward 4, 69% of the workers said they would like not to have smoking, and 66% of the patrons.
Okay, and what we have to do is take those data and interpret that as this is the fraction of people who would be in favor of the proposed modification to the ordinance, which is not necessarily the same thing, because one of the points you raise is about some of the arguments against it, like rights of the bar owner, which is not quite the same as, you know, in the abstract, a person might say, I'm against smoking in bars, and then you say, but the bar owner has rights, and they say, oh, well.
Right.
Right.
No.
What kind of feedback as alderman are you getting on this from your constituents? Are you getting people calling you saying, hey, go for it? Or are you getting people saying, hey, this is the worst thing I ever heard of? Or are you getting?
Well, at the last meeting, we had 20 people speaking for and 7 people speaking against. And so far as my emails that I get at home, it's not even, it's nothing like that wide a gap. It's much, I mean, it's much wider gap. It's like 3 or 4 to 50.
Okay. And are you two guys getting?
I didn't do
Any
such a good
contact
job
on
of
the issue?
counting as a delegate at the last meeting, but I would have said yes, it was. At the council meeting, I got a sense of support for it, overwhelming, in my emails and calls. I would say I'm having a lot more support than against, but the against arguments are very strong as well. So, and I'm really trying to read them and understand them, but I'm also, but like just to count them, I would say I'm getting more feedback from the proponents rather than the opponents. But the opponents make a good case that needs to be understood and considered. So it's a topic that we're getting a lot of communication on across
That's
the board.
part of my question.
Yeah, and which you know, it's an important topic, and it's something that I take very seriously. And also Fayetteville is very willing to communicate with their council members, so that most of the time we get a lot of comments about things too, you know, but this especially is an issue that people care about.
Yeah.
So
A comment, Rhonda, I'm sorry.
go back.
A comment I'd like to make. I lived through the last one, you know, and it was extremely contentious. And one of my very close friends, Richard Maynard, was one of the primary opponents to the proposed ordinance. I'm trying to recall whether Richard was even a smoker. You know, I think for some reason he just got fired up about that. And I don't detect that contentiousness this time. Do you?
I lived here when I guess the other public places, when that decision was made, and I remember I was just kind of getting involved at the time, and I remember it was very contentious, and I don't sense that as much to that degree at this time.
I think one of the big differences is that you have over 300 restaurants that were being affected, and everyone goes out to eat. We're talking like about maybe 20 bars, is that right, Tyler?
28.
28 bars, and not near everyone in the city goes to the bars. So some people's attitude is, you know, I don't give a rip what they do in the bars, I don't go to the bars. So I think I don't think it's anything like as contentious as last time.
No, I don't feel like it is either. People do have strong opinions about it, but it's not to the level it was.
Right.
I think anytime we work to protect the rights of a group of people, we have to admit that we take away the rights of the other group of people, right? You don't legislate anything without another side being affected. And so I think that is the issue that we're dealing with. I read today something that I found kind of interesting. A state, I think it was Florida, was going to deregulate some of the the licensing procedures, and they said if they took away the licensing requirement for interior designers, that was a big push by some legislator to make it possible for people to be an interior designer without a license. Free these people up to practice their trade. Well, the statistics show that about 88,000 people might be affected by disease-infected fabric. And so the state decided that it must protect its people by making interior designers be licensed. So that caught my attention because I thought, we are talking about something that protects people even unknowingly, perhaps. And so I think the personal stories, I'm getting a lot of those personal stories, a lot of emails. I engage a lot of the opponents because I want to hear what they say. I want to know what it is they think they're giving up, what right it is, what freedom it is that they're giving up. And I've had some really interesting conversations. I've spent more time on something that doesn't affect me very much than I ever dreamed I would, because I don't, I'm like those people that say, I'm not getting there, I'm not breathing it. But I do have a personal story like Adela does. I have a son-in-law who's a professional guitar player, and he went to college to make that talent even better. And when I wrote that to an opponent, doesn't my son-in-law have a right to be protected and have clean air, he wrote back, he can get a different job. He doesn't have to go to those places. Well, that bothered me a little bit. So I don't know, it's a very personal issue, and I think maybe we're not getting the power of the big numbers that we got on the restaurant issue, but I do think it's almost like the water issue where people feel personally, their rights are personally taken away, and I must admit that I'm very affected by that, and I think it's a personal decision or a personal feeling by some people that can be very, it bothers me a lot. It's a tough issue to say that it's a very few bars, it's a very few people who go there. Why do we want to take away their right? And anytime we take away the right of a group, we affect the other side. On the other hand, we are supposed to be in these positions to help protect people and pass regulation that helps protect people, even if it's interior designers, I think. So those are what, I know that's a long, I didn't mean to go off on a long talk there, but I do think that's to answer your question, but lots of comments on both sides that are very personal, I think, okay, personal stories.
I'm interpreting this as the numbers are not as great, the people involved in the debate is not as great this time around, yeah. But you still have people on both sides with intense feelings.
Intense feelings, right. I think so. Yeah.
I would say I'm getting more support than not, generally saying, as far as contact goes.
Well, I'll stick my neck out and say I support it.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, I'm not sure I ever would have raised the issue, but now that it's raised, I support it.
Well, it helps us to hear from. It really helps us to hear from people. I can't make that clear enough. It does help.
If you turn your email on, you have 32 new emails. Yeah. You have a choice of going, oh no, or you have a choice of saying, oh great, and start answering back, which is the way I feel about it. The more emails I get and the more input and the more, the better this issue is for me personally as someone who has to cast a vote.
What other questions do you have for Adela? Yes, Keith.
You were talking about a minute ago about a smoke-free Arkansas to get the corporations, to come in for stuff.
Yeah.
Is there any other cities in Arkansas considering this, or is any other smoke-free?
There's some others that are considering it. I've been in communication with Eureka Springs, for instance. They want to see our ordinance. They want to know about it. It was considered at the state legislature, and they decided not to bring it forward. So, Tyler, do you know of any other cities that are looking at it at this time?
There's a small community outside of Hot Springs called Fayetteville Bay, and they have about 4 people and 5 cows. No. They're a small resort community, and they have a couple restaurants and a couple bars, and they are considered a comprehensive smoke-free city because they don't allow smoke in any of those venues. So
they are already smoke-free.
They are already smoke-free, 100%. So
that's great.
Small community, obviously, than Fayetteville, but Fayetteville has been seen as that leader because we were the first. You got to think this ordinance goes back to '92 when Ben Kit Williams, a councilman, and Dan Cootie were the first to institute a smoking ban in every place but bowling alleys, bingo halls, restaurants, and bars. So this ordinance is not new by any stretch. So the 2004 amendment was to take away the restaurants, and this proposed amendment to take away the bars. So we're making these strides just to make it a cleaner Fayetteville, and really, I think after the 2004 initiative, the 2005 Clean Indoor Air Act came through the state. So you saw Fayetteville be the leader, and the state followed there afterwards. So that's pretty fantastic.
Yes.
A comment?
Yeah.
There will always be opposition to any legislation. That's a given. But the opponents of this one are dying off.
Oh.
Literally.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
Exactly.
You know, I had someone call me today and she just wanted to express her opinion, and I listened very carefully. And she said, you know, I brought up the insurance issue, and she said, oh, I would never work. She said she was a smoker. She said, I would never work in a place that I didn't have insurance. And I said, and if you keep smoking, you're going to need it, don't you? And she said, yes, I know that. So she was not terribly opposed.
Is there final questions or comments? Adele, thank you. And again, this is being heard tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock upstairs.
And then June 7th.
And then again on June 7th.
One more reading.
Yes.
The third reading will be on June the 7th. We have 1 week off in there, so there'll be 2 weeks in between the 17th and June 7th. But our final vote will be on the 7th, and we would welcome you to come and speak or watch on channel 216. And if you feel like you don't like the way the evening's going, you can just hop up and come down, because we'll probably be here for a few hours listening to folks express their opinion. And so we would love to have you come and express your opinion.
And you can email any of us, and,
Yes.
and the emails are sent to all the council members when there's something like that. So that's very helpful too. We all
Yes.
get one email gets to.
Well, if you send it to the city clerk,
To the city clerk.
she'll send it to all of us. Or you can
It's very
email us individually. Well, thank you, Adela.
You're
Thanks for
welcome.
coming.
You're welcome. Happy to do it. And Tyler
And
and
Tyler
Yeah,
and
thanks.
Paige.
Always happy.
And Gary.
And Gary, thanks for coming. All right, well, next on the agenda, we have neighborhood and just questions, announcements, things you need us to check on, and then I have some things I would like to share with you as well. So, what's happening in your neighborhoods or on your street or?
Yes.
We just found out this afternoon, there's a house out on Highway 62 West, 3710 is the house number. And apparently they're asking for rezoning.
Okay, you saw the little red sign out there?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
been residential, and they're wanting urban thoroughfare. And, so what all is that going to?
I think that's one of the, okay, well, let's check, we can check on it, because did you just see it today?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's been there for a while, we just had time today to stop.
Right. Well, I don't, have you heard anything about it? It hasn't come through our agendas, but I can check on it.
3710.
Okay. Urban thoroughfare, that's one of the form-based zoning, and what it's more just to, is that accurate? I think that's right. It's one of the form-based zoning. It's not like C1, C2, RF7, it's not the coded ones. And what it does is that we have some new form-based codes or zonings where it establishes more structure with the shape of the building and so on, and the setbacks are less deep and so on. So we can check on that and find out what that is.
I was wondering if maybe a junkyard could be put in there, because there's a lot of junk cars in the back, even though they're building a privacy fence around it. We already have one junkyard out there. I don't.
Is it vacant? Is the house vacant?
I I don't know.
I can't tell. Okay.
So probably they've requested it. Property owners probably requested something, so let's find out.
But it's been residential,
Yeah. Okay.
and now they're remodeling it and asking for new zoning.
Oh, wait a minute, check with Jeremy. but no. Okay.
But for years, they have told us that road out that way is going to remain residential and business.
Okay.
And it seems like everybody's wanting straight business out there now.
Okay.
Which is gonna put a lot more traffic
Yeah.
out on an already busy road.
All right. Well, for sure, what I can think of doing is clarify what that is and find out when the meetings are about it. Because that's, I think, what we need to figure out is when they're going to be discussing that at either at the subdivision or planning commission. Let's see. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right. What else? What's going on? Yes. Bill.
Nothing exciting in our
Okay.
neighborhood, but Brian, you might want to bring folks up to date on the changes, recent personnel changes taking place in what used to be called community-oriented policing. Is it still called that?
It is. Our
Okay.
community-oriented policing division, which is, we use some office space out of the Northwest Arkansas Mall, and it handles a number of things. It will do everything from data collection to it manages all of the Freedom of Information Act requests that come through, as well as our public information officer, Sergeant Bill Phelan, who had run that division, is retired, and Corporal Chrisman has taken a job in private, it's not a private industry, it's a state government, but he's taken another job. So Sergeant Craig Stout has been reassigned, and he is formerly from the COP division. So he'd been up there for a number of years as both a school resource officer, which is one of the elements of that, and then working specifically in PIO and public relations, as well as some of the other stuff. And he's now back up there reassigned to run the division. So it should be a pretty smooth transition. Sergeant Stout is as good as gold. He knows what he's doing, so don't hesitate if you've got some questions that he can help with to give him a call. Or holler at us, and we'll direct you in the right way to get you to it.
Do we still have where people could go to the community? Was it like Citizen
Police Academy.
Police
We've not
Academy?
had one in the last couple of years.
Okay.
Some of it has been to do with staffing levels and some draws on our resources, and we've just had there. It takes an extraordinary amount of work, and COP division is who puts that on.
Okay.
It's not anything we've forgotten about. It is still there. It's still on the agenda to happen. It's just we have to make sure we're stretching our resources in the right directions.
Okay. Can people do ride-alongs if they want?
Right.
How does
Well,
that work?
right now that issue is in the city attorney's office, looking on some paperwork and some liability issues.
Mm-hmm.
We hope that they've had time to once the KIT's office has had time to address it and get back with us, and we'll kind of know how to proceed from there.
Okay. As I did one when I was learning about city council, and I learned so much. It was really, really helpful, just to see, what goes on. It wasn't really eventful or anything.
Was it what you expected?
I guess it was more than I could ever hope for. It was.
Me too. I had a wonderful day.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really eventful or anything. It was just I really learned about what all of the goes on and all that you have to think about, and it's not.
It's a little bit of multitasking is nice.
Multitasking, but the thing I was so impressed with, and I think is maybe I noticed it because I'm a former teacher, is the teaching and counseling that takes place by officers. That while I sat in the car, I could hear on the radio the officer had gone into a house where there was a disagreement between a mom and her son, and he counseled them right there on the radio, did a whole counseling session, very well done, and dissolved the situation, and everybody was fine, and he got in the car and he said, we got to figure it out, and off we went to the next thing. It was really well done. So, I think that was the thing I didn't, I mean, you think about it, of course they have to do that, but you don't, I had forgotten and that was repeated throughout the evening, was a lot of just diffusing the situation.
De-escalation.
De-escalation, there's the word.
Absolutely.
Really, this officer was very good at it, very, very good at it. So, yes.
One other question, back, I guess a couple months ago, so we heard rumors that the Aldi store is coming out on 62. Do y'all know anything about that?
Aldi on 62? I have not heard anything about that.
It's already passed.
It passed? Okay.
It's going to go in some projects to across from Lowe's.
Okay, we knew that,
Okay.
at one point there was, you know, the
Okay.
ways ordinance, there's signs that we were talking about a minute ago
Yeah.
there, but they're disappeared, so we didn't know what happened.
Okay, so that's what it is, across from Lowe's. Thank you.
Good to know, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm on the street committee. It's another kind of neighborhood thing, I think, is that the city suffered a lot of damage with the flood that evening, and I think we should really be very proud of the way our city responded to that. They jumped in there, our police and fire officers and our mayor and the street supervisor, Terry Gully, and our ward suffered some damage out there. The new road at Mount Comfort Porter exit kind of became gravel that night. And they were out there with it. It's really took a lot of hits because it was brand new. And Terry explained at one point that it was just sort of the pavement was floating, the water just rushed under. And we saw a presentation to the city council that I think is on the website now of just the bicycle tunnels and the trails and all, how that we're just completely filled with water. And so I just think we ought to stop and thank all of you for the great work you did that night, because it was a quick decision had to be made by people to jump in there and try to protect us all from driving that we were doing and the meetings that we were trying to decide whether to cancel or not. And I was very, very impressed. The city has an emergency management plan in place now that we did not have in place when the mayor took over, and we got a little bit of a presentation on that as well, and what they had done and how they were first
Actually,
now
it's on
able
the
to.
agenda tomorrow. It's on the agenda to be approved. Yeah.
Very impressive that they went to work on that after the ice storm and then were able to implement it at this flood time. And I think we should be really proud that our city has an emergency plan, and it worked and helped, and it was
Yeah.
so.
It's good. Yes, Aubrey.
Aubrey Shepherd. In talking about the same subject, this brings up something I've said at a couple of other meetings. You guys, when they bring the master plan to you, you need to ask, or maybe you could ask beforehand, how many actual flooded houses, flooded, damaged infrastructure, and other things occurred in the city, because there's not a way to get that together easily, because I know of 4 houses that had never had water in them in my neighborhood alone.
Yeah.
And I saw instances of, when I drove around, there were a lot of city guys out, transportation department and every other department sent people out to scout, see where they need to close a street, that kind of thing. And this needs to be taken into account now that we have an idea of what a real serious flash flood situation is in Fayetteville. My neighborhood talked about it for years, but some areas hadn't had that much before. And
We can ask
it
about-
was worse than our neighborhood.
Yeah. I'm not sure, I can find out, or we can find out about the inventory. I don't know that that's been compiled, but I know that,
Completed yet.
yeah, I don't think it's
But it's
together.
being
We
done.
have
But it's
to put
being
together.
done.
It is being
Yeah.
done, but I
There's
don't
a
think it's
map, and
completed.
it's, yeah.
That's something, sorry, I'll follow up.
It could change the thinking of everybody about infill and a lot of things. Because the preparing ordinance will protect some lots from being split and houses built in the lowest part of the floodplain. But what goes on right now with a single family home on one of these split lots, you have no absorbent soil left.
Yeah.
And I can show you instances that have been built in the last couple of years in the neighborhood conservation zone, for instance. So if we go with some of the plans that are in there, we may make the flooding worse, is what I'm saying.
Oh, no, it's a good point.
It's a little late in the process for this, the 2030 plan we're working on. And you
Right.
guys will have it before you,
It's
in a month or
coming.
two, I guess.
Yeah, next month. I
Next
believe.
month, yeah. So,
That's
I
something
want to see
I-
those flooded areas incorporated into,
he said,
something we can look at.
yeah.
and I'm glad to hear there is a compilation being made of what's.
Well, and of course, I can't speak for every division. I know that one of the things we're looking at is how has that affected mine, and you know, what we were looking at overtime costs within, 48 hours. We were compiling that, and that's one resource that you're talking about. The physical damage, I can only assume the rest of the divisions are looking at what they had to do, not only with resources, but with damage to all the roadways that were damaged. I mean, we had to shut North College down.
And we
It's
can request.
not very often North College itself floods, so
Yeah.
it's kind of a once in a while sort of event.
We can request to have that made available in some way, either figure out who to, just ask those questions when it comes up, because I know that they'll be talking about it. So.
And I know that, I mean, if you're, so much in the past, I've got on video, on YouTube, city engineer some years ago saying, well, we can't, as long as you do follow the Corps regulations, we can't consider what will happen downstream because of what you build. And now I think if you look at the latest version, you can.
Yeah,
So
you can now.
that has to be an important part of the thinking.
I
Thank you.
agree, thank you.
We toured the wastewater treatment center today, and we saw, they're thinking about this too out there. They were underwater, and lots to think about there.
So a couple things, for the sake, we want to get you out of here tonight, but a couple things. I've been sending out, if you're not receiving emails from me, you're not on the listserv for Ward 4. And because what I'm doing is passing along the what are they called? Public notifications, so press releases. So the city will do a press release, and I send that out. One of the things is related to the flood damage. So if you've had flood damage, I just received that, I guess it was either yesterday or today, but I need to send that out to you, that if you have personal flood damage, they have contact information that you can go to and find out more information. So I'll send that out. But so after the meeting, if you haven't received, and you will know it because I try to send them in chunks so that you're not just randomly receiving things, but so I wait and I send them all out one after another because they send us a lot of stuff. So, and we try to keep it to city-related events or sponsored events. And so if you want to receive those, I can certainly include you. And the other thing is city council tours. Rhonda, you just mentioned that we went on a city council tour. Every other Monday, the council is going on a tour. And like you were saying, we went to the water sewer, the water treatment facility today. But what I was going to ask is if you would consider, we were there today, if you would consider, and it's hard to get there, but I would like to encourage all council members to go on the city council tours. And if you as citizens would encourage all of the council to go on city council tours, we're touring the facilities, the city facilities. And I think it's a really good and beneficial thing. There's always things that come up, but I think if they could hear from you all on the benefits of having your council members see the city facilities that we vote on funding, essentially, and going out and seeing those and walking through them, and I think it's worthwhile. So I'll put that little plug in. If you'll send an email out to the whole council, including us, say we really support you going on those tours, and they're every other Monday right before the city council meeting. And right now they have a whole suite through August of city facilities that the staff has recommended we go visit.
Is that list published, or the fact that it exists published?
It's on the weekly, what the public meetings for the week of, on the city website, and I also try to post it on my blog, but as every week the city publishes the public meetings for the week. And so here today, the 16th city council tour, and they tell where we're going. So you can find that on the city page weekly posted. and also posted on the city page. I'd like to make a plug for Ward 4 citizens being on boards and commissions. Last time we had, I think we had 4 new Ward 4 members get appointed to boards and commissions. So that was really exciting. We're taking nominations, city's taking nominations now. So consider it.
Openings, remember?
Oh, I think maybe Tree and Landscape has one. I didn't bring the list tonight.
Remember
but
Action Committee has one.
Telecom board.
Telecom board. Not library this time, I don't think, but Animal Services maybe has one. And so that's out there on the city webpage too. And it'd be great to have more Ward 4 citizens on those boards. I mean, it's great.
Well, one more question or 2 more questions, then we'll close. Yes, Charles.
I attended a city council meeting last year sometime at which a permit was renewed for a subdivision on the other side of Salem Road from Holcomb School.
Okay.
I've never been able to find that. I am really curious. If the
Was this
city
a while?
approved it,
Was it like a? When did you? When
I can't remember, Sarah.
was it like? I'm just trying to think. I think was it the one where they extended the permit because they hadn't built for a while?
Because they haven't built.
Okay,
That's right.
so okay, go ahead.
And I was curious.
Mhm.
My recollection is that was low-lying property.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what happened to it
Okay.
during this flood and whether they've ever actually started construction. I can find it on Google Earth,
Yeah.
but I can't find a route into it.
Okay. Do you remember? Yeah, I'll check. I just recently emailed with Jeremy Pate about that project because they're coming up on their deadline and they hadn't.
Hadn't done it? Okay.
So we need to check on that project. Then I can follow up with him. At that time, that was like probably a month ago. So they had a certain amount of time to file with the county because they're like they had to do something with the county, I think. So I'll check on that. I know which one you're talking about, and it was in April. I checked on it and they hadn't done anything. So I'll check back with you. Okay.
Roberta had a question.
Okay, I was glad that Aubrey brought that up about the flooding. On South Morningside Drive, that was closed this time. The water was actually over the bridge there at the town branch. And had the deal not fell through on the farmland across from some property that we own, they were going to build little single-family dwellings all the way down to what I kept telling them was going to be in the floodplain.
Yeah.
And it was even more this time.
Okay.
Water everywhere on it.
All up. Yeah.
The house that we own happens to be up on a hill, and our son's house is up on a hill because we knew where to put them.
Right.
They were going to build these practically down to the water's edge.
Sure. Okay, so that's on Morningside?
Yes, South
Okay.
Morningside Drive.
And it's not developed, it's just platted?
Oh, no, it fell through.
It
Thank
fell
goodness.
through.
Otherwise, they would all have been
Floating
underwater.
away.
Okay.
I mean, that whole area looked like a lake.
Oh, yeah. There were a couple of, I went to Total Geek and drove around to look at those kinds of things to see where, like, especially my research sites for Clear Creek, I was very curious about. That was a raging river. My goodness, it was interesting. If you want to see how water flows, that was a good one to go. Where it would flow.
Yeah, the Kellogg's kids were riding inner tubes down Leverett.
Oh, Well, everybody, thank you so much for coming, and we'll get you on with your evening, and appreciate it. And we have some things that we'll want to follow up with you. And again, if you're not receiving emails from me and sometimes Rhonda, then you're not on the listserv. And check out Rhonda's blog; it's pretty cool. So thank you. We're adjourned.